Welcome to Alternate Endings.
Half audiobook.
Half podcast.
Full apocalypse.
This time, we discuss the short story from our last episode and walk through the real-world implications of this kind of apocalypse. Welcome everyone to the recap episode for the short story about arguably and predictably the biggest hailstorm in world history to come.
Oh, hell no!
That's Hail.
Yeah. Tyler Chrisley.
Ivan here.
Jordan Zanardelli here. Again.
Wow. 2 episodes
Back to
in
back.
a row. Yeah. Oh.
That's right.
So I want to start off with a story, a personal recount of the tale that brought me to write such a short story. Because there are some people who might be tuning into this podcast and wondering, when are they going to cover the regular stuff? Virus, the plague, typical zombies, vampires, or whatever people think when they think of apocalypse. Nuclear war. But no, we went with the hailstorm. And that is because last year in July of 2018, I experienced a sort of, I don't know if I want to go ahead and say eye-opening, but it was a reckoning experience. I was sitting in my office working on things, and my girlfriend Holly was sitting right next to me, and she has a view out the window. And we knew it was raining, but it was a summer day, it was July, but I didn't think anything of it. And all of a sudden, I heard this really loud noise pick up, and she said, "Oh, it's hailing." And I said, "Really?" And I walked over to the window and I looked outside, and the community pool for our apartment complex is outside of her window. And I promise you that what I saw was a boiling swimming pool. The way the hail was hitting this pool was insanity. And my first thought was, oh my God, my car. Because she has covered parking, I don't. So I ran outside. As soon as I exited the apartment, I realized how loud it was. And I saw this hail cracking on the concrete. It was bouncing. It looked like just golf balls were being dumped everywhere. And they're bouncing in every direction. Some were shattering. Some wouldn't. Some would stay in a cohesive piece and bounce back up into the air. And I looked over at my car and I was like, oh my God. So I ran inside and I grabbed my bicycle helmet and my car keys. So I have my bicycle helmet because I wanted to protect my head to run to my car. It was about 30 to 40 foot run to my vehicle underneath the awning and the protection of my apartment building. So I have my bicycle helmet on my head and I run out. Even with that helmet on, what I witnessed from that hail coming down, and this is in Greeley, Colorado, for you listeners out there, in July of 2018, I was too afraid to walk out from underneath the protection. Even with my helmet on. It was so loud. And my car, in the next few moments, I watched its windshield get completely busted in.
Oh, dang. You actually watched it break?
Yeah, and I watched my back glass not only get perfectly penetrated, so holes went through my back glass of my car, but it caved in the glass, and I started watching hail bounce in and out of my vehicle. And I sat there and I watched a parking lot full of cars get obliterated by this hail. And I held my hand out to see what it felt like, and it stung so bad. I said, "No, I'm not going to move my car. It's done." So I sat there, and I felt utterly and completely helpless. And it was in that moment I realized that hail does not give a shit about you. It doesn't give two damns about what you're up to, what possessions you have outside, and there was nothing that anybody can do. And what was strange is, as soon as it was over, it was so quiet, and there was no rain, and there was this intense fog because the ice was now like fully covering the parking lot, and you could see people coming out, and everyone was assessing their damages. Some people's windshields were broken, some weren't, but everyone's cars were dented, and it was just that feeling of helplessness, and it was like, wow. And that was like golf ball, maybe a little bit bigger. Like, what would you say is bigger than a golf ball?
Softball?
Grapefruit.
Well, softball's kind of a step, actually.
Grapefruit.
Orange. Tennis ball?
Tennis ball, maybe. Yeah, so it wasn't huge.
A watermelon? That's
Yeah.
definitely bigger than a golf ball. I just need a little perspective here.
It blew up my windshield, my back glass, got that all replaced, and it just really made me think, like, what if the hailstorm had been twice as big? What would that have been like to
What's the damage that can be done by...
Yeah.
If it's little pieces of hail. we all know hail. When you think of hail, I feel like you think little pellets that come down and it looks like a fresh powder of snow almost after it's all said and done.
Yeah.
But when you have when you have bigger pieces, I mean, I feel like every person is seen on Facebook or whatever source of media they use, they see pictures of giant hail somewhere. And I mean, there's times you see people holding full palm-sized pieces of hail. And even that'll do major damage to anyone and anything. And like you said, weather of any sort does not care who you are. It is coming and it will decide when it wants to stop on its own.
And another devastating thing about hail is it's often accompanied by tornadoes, and they come together because the size of the storm cell brings the air up, and the same types of storms produce both hail and tornado, which would be equally sucky and awful to have both.
And can you imagine hail inside of a tornado? Just flying around out all those different directions?
Just a flail of hail.
Oh. Oh, man.
So when applying to the actual story from our audiobook last episode, what are some things that stuck out to you or thoughts you have coming into this recap?
When I think of storms in general, there's so many variety of problems that can arise. And it's more than just one thing at a time. Take a hurricane. When it's coming off the coast, you're not just worried about the rain coming down. You're worried about the wind. You're worried about the giant waves that are coming in and crashing. Like, you're worried about the flooding. It's more than just one little piece. So like you already talked about with their tornadoes, it's not just hail that they have to worry about. It's a ton of rain that's coming down at the same time. It's tornadoes, it's wind, it's all sorts of these different things that come up. And when you have hail that size, if you have a volleyball piece of hail and you're driving along, even if you're coming back through in the aftermath, how do you drive through that? How do you navigate the wreckage that's left over of,
And you really can't.
Yeah.
You really can't.
You describe it as King Kong. How do you walk through King Kong's wreckage? Yeah, stopping at a stoplight and you can just hear every time it hits your car. Every time it hits your windshield, you just hope and pray that it doesn't break.
Yeah.
Because it sucks. You're going to have to fix it. But if you're driving, and even at any decent speed, that's terrifying.
Yeah, that's not coming at you. And the entire time, it just sounds like, it's hail, but it sounds like rocks are hitting your car, and it's going to break through at any second.
I personally remember driving through storms at times, and I think it might even be the same storm. I think I was coming up, and I just hit the tail end of it, because it wasn't awful. But at the same time, I could tell every single time it hit my car. And every time, and it was on a highway at the time that was 85 miles an hour. And so it's like, or I was going 85. Don't tell anyone. But
I'm turning you in.
Please don't. It kind of amplifies it. And so I even slowed down once it started because I didn't want to be driving 85 and have the combination of my speed and the speed of a piece of hail coming down kill me. It could. If I have that momentary lapse of spinning my car or whatever, it's done for.
Yeah. And if one of those pieces of hail does break through your windshield and then another one hits you in the right spot, knocks you unconscious, you're off the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what happens there?
Do you want to end up like that woman from the story?
Yeah, no.
Gruesome. I think that's something that you can, I don't know if everyone's experienced hail, but for those who have, I think you can entirely picture that moment, and it is absolutely terrifying.
And it feels so helpless. Like seconds later, he just saw this woman get pulverized, basically, and he realizes, like, oh my goodness, I could have just backed my truck up and helped her, but he wasn't thinking. He was caught. He was overwhelmed. It's so loud, so much chaos is happening that he just didn't think.
And even then, what happens if his car gets destroyed too? Then it's both people in the middle of the road.
Yeah, honestly, he had a decision to make. It was either he does back up his car and try and help that woman at the risk of probably losing his life, or he stays there where he's safe and she needs to risk it for the biscuit and maybe make it, maybe not.
There was something terrifying to me about writing how your car would get banged up so much that it couldn't move anymore. The tires were flat, and maybe the hood has been pushed down so much that it has started to corrupt the engine's ability to move. Your windshield's caving in, and it's kind of like that moment in Jurassic Park where your foot is on the gas pedal, you're flooring, you're trying to get away from death, and it just is coming in around you from every corner. And she panicked, right? Like Jordan and I were talking before we started recording that maybe she could have survived, like if she climbed in the back of her back seat and got in the floorboard, or maybe the trunk or something. She could have survived, right? Yeah. But when
that was my first thought.
Like she panicked, right? She saw the overpass. She saw that this young man was fine with his truck underneath there, and she decided to act, and
she thought she could make it
for it. Yeah.
When he is underneath the pass, his ears are closed. It is so loud. I mean, you even talked about in your little thing, golf ball size hail. It was so loud. It's all you can think about. So, I mean, at that moment, he is freaking out. And you even kind of describe what to me sounds like he's having a panic attack after he watches her get pummeled. He's walking to it. He's starting to lose his vision. It's harder to breathe. He stumbles a little bit and he's like about to pass out, and he eventually does throw up. On top of that, beforehand, it's so loud he can't even think. So, I mean, I couldn't blame him personally for not going out and doing it. It's not his first thought. On top of before he's already kind of thinking, oh, this asshole almost ran into me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get away and they almost took me out beforehand. Like, so it's kind of all these different layers of I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just worried about my own safety and worried, oh, is this bridge even going to survive?
And I'm sure because it is so loud and so the hail is so thunderous, not only hitting on top of the bridge, but then hitting near it and echoing within under the overpass, that noise is probably the exact same noise that he heard when it hit that woman in the head. So it's just like constantly hearing that noise. And from the way he reacted, it was probably also the first dead body he saw, or someone die right in front of his eyes, which that's crazy too.
And you put it into perspective, he only saw the one. He was underneath the underpass. There weren't many people out. Most people were in their houses. Like the first woman, what is it? Kendra. Thank you. Kendra even talks about she saw one car on the road and the whole time. The 30 minutes leading up to when the storm was supposed to hit. And imagine being in an apartment building that eventually ends up ripped up by a tornado. If you were smart and were on the first floor and were hiding, now you're completely open to volleyball size hail, if not bigger. Like what? You're completely left out in the open. So it's that combination of Mother Nature. There's nothing you can do.
Were you all disappointed by Dylan when we switched characters and you thought he was heading to Kendra's apartment?
I was just like, typical fuckboy. Look at him. God damn it, Dylan. Like, God damn it. But, I mean, he was smooth enough where Kendra didn't know.
It was just kind of
disappointed for sure.
Yeah, it was a disappointment, and it kind of played into his character, I think, when all he really thought about was himself. Oh, yeah. And so even in the underpass, it wasn't until after the consequences that he was like, oh, I could have made this situation better.
Yeah.
Kendra breaks up with him, not knowing, and he kind of thinks about it, but not even too much of like, oh, I could have done something earlier about it. But I just let it get bad and was distant. Whether purposeful or not, I think it played well into his character choices for the end of the storm.
And like you said, he didn't even think about it until he was on the way to Sierra's place. Like, it was already, this is endgame. It's a fucked up situation. The only thing left is to go to Sierra.
Yeah, she's the one who texted me.
Cut my losses. And then he showed no urgency to even think about getting back in the car and helping her as soon as she got out. Like, he was just like, let's watch, see what happens next. Maybe she'll make it, maybe she won't. Yeah. Like, he didn't like immediately reach for his keys and think about hopping in. He just stood there.
Watched and was like, oh, I think I hear her screaming.
Yeah.
Unplug my ears. Oh, it's super loud. And she's screaming. I'm going to plug my ears again.
Yeah, basically.
I mean,
I don't like this. So
yeah, the word that comes to mind for Dylan is coward. He was so scared to tell Kendra. He couldn't even say, I just am not feeling it. Let's break up. And the same cowardice showed its head again when he had the opportunity to help somebody out and he just didn't take the right step. And when I was originally writing it, I was going to make Dylan drive over to Kendra's house. And he was going to see the tornado, like, rip the apartment apart. And he was going to see there. But then I kind of thought, like, ooh, what if I add a little layer? Like Garth Brooks, The Thunder Rolls, right? Yeah. Like, actually, instead of going to Kendra's, he's going to go to somebody else's house and show that this sort of interplay. And they both have these urges, right? Like, Kendra and Dylan both really have this sense of urgency that they want to talk to this other person. Kendra wants to talk to Dylan really bad.
When she
Dylan
has her
wants to talk
dad.
to Sierra really bad.
When he potentially has his Kendra.
Yeah, and it's bad timing on the verge of the worst storm in world history, arguably. But that's part of humanity, right? Like, life doesn't plan itself conveniently around the weather forecast and work. It's like when you have BS in your life you want to deal with it right now.
Yep. There's never a perfect time to deal with anything. You just need to take care of what you need to take care of.
Yeah.
Move on.
One of my favorite scenes to write was the two cars plowing down an empty road that had a lot of water on it with the hail cloud following right behind them. And he sees the lights slowly get like swallowed up by the hail, and eventually they're flickering because the hail
back
is
and
coming
forth.
in front of it.
And I think anyone that's seen a rain cloud move in knows what to picture there. I know at that point in the story, I'd completely lost myself in imagining a wall of ginormous hail on top of rain and just pure darkness coming in and out. And you can see, it's so funny you talked about Jurassic Park earlier, because I imagine a Jurassic Park scene of you see these these headlights that are flickering in and out, plowing as fast as you can to get to safety, running from that ginormous T-Rex that is a storm.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do but go forward. You can't fight that head on. It's going to win every single time. That's just nature as a whole. You just take it even to the opposite end. What's going to happen if there's a volcanic eruption and there's lava coming towards you? You know, Avatar. You can't bend that away. You run. For some people who weren't fast enough, there's obviously going to be that ending that's met, and it's sad that regardless for Dylan and how crappy of a person he is or how it ended up, it's still a sad thing to have to watch and be a part of. Like it obviously changed him forever. Couldn't really talk about it. It took a long time for him to mention it, and it even says he told his first wife, and then the second wife knew.
That's not something we talk about.
Yeah, that's an off. And that was just one little thing that not little, because a giant storm and it killed almost 1 million people, but
Which is
it's
crazy.
monumental.
It's hard for us to even fathom what it would be like to have a storm that big to kill that many people in the same country. I mean, we've never had an incident like that. I mean, since maybe World War II, and I don't even know how many soldiers were killed in World War II. I'm sure it was more than a million.
Just soldiers, yeah.
So
And
many.
just thinking about this storm that people were like, oh yeah, it's going to be a big hail. And it was big enough to kill people. And then there's tornadoes involved as well. Like, that would just be a natural catastrophe that people would talk about for 100 years afterwards.
Right. And then you also mentioned, like, people were just saying it's going to be big hail. Did you mention how in history, what the biggest piece of hail was?
We have not yet, but I've come with some facts and figures for thy listener. So, currently to date, the biggest hail ever recorded in the world was found in South Dakota, and it was 8 inches in diameter. It was almost a foot wide.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, that's terrifying on its own.
It is, but also if someone was like, hey, we're going to get big hail in, you're thinking, okay, it's probably going to be
Golf ball.
Yeah. Probably be a little bit better.
Like
than-
maybe tennis ball.
Maybe
Yeah.
at most, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, tennis ball or
ball.
baseball.
Yeah.
But then these giant beach
But
balls.
not these, these watermelons coming
Yeah.
down.
And can you imagine? You even talk about some break, some don't. Can you imagine the rebound of a watermelon-sized hail
Well,
off
that's
the
what I was
ground?
thinking, like,
It's the bounce on those suckers.
he's under the overpass, right? So he's like 20, 30 feet from the edge, and he's still getting ice spray. Because when they fall and crack right next to the edge of the overpass, it's like spraying him constantly with debris. It'd be chaos. So this biggest piece of hail that they recorded weighed about 2 pounds.
2 pounds?
So that means that
Wow.
the piece of hail in the story that got to 2 and 3 feet in diameter probably weighed 6, 7, 8 pounds.
Oh, it's
Imagine
not
that
even
slamming
more.
Yeah.
I
on
mean,
your
if it's
car or your head.
a beach ball thick, I'm assuming 15, 20 pounds.
Yeah.
And
I mean, imagine
not-
that weight falling on your head
Right.
at that speed.
Dunsky.
You're done skiing.
Lights out.
Immediately.
I mean, even now, big hail now, that can kill people.
Oh, yeah.
Which you don't even need to get to that ginormous size. Like, there's people who die from hail now.
So I was looking for incidents, and I wanted to find what's the worst incident of hail death in human history. Now, what would be your guess for everything that's been in recorded history, the most amount of people that died in a single incident? What do you think?
Of hail?
Yeah.
I don't want to guess high just because, for
Right. Think it
for sake. But
take
I
a
would say,
realistic
like the
guess.
teens?
I was going to say, I would
20s?
say 15 people.
Yeah. Teens or
Okay.
20s?
And where do you think this might have occurred?
South Dakota.
Yeah, Canada.
If they're getting
maybe.
8 inches.
Canada, the Dakotas, Montana, Pacific Northwest or Canada.
Yeah, I would say Montana.
Yeah.
So I learned this earlier today, and the story is shocking. I was not ready for this. This is fascinating. Back in the 100 Years' War between England and France, there was a troop of English soldiers right outside of Chartreuse, France. And while they were marching and moving as a unit, a very intense hailstorm came in and killed over 1,000
What?
Holy
English
moly.
troops.
I didn't want to say
Wow.
100 because I thought I was going to overshoot. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And here's
I
something
thought,
absurd.
Like 50 was going to be too many.
It apparently killed over 5,000 horses, which
Wow.
is interesting because, like, how did it kill more horses than men? Were they like hiding under
they
horses?
probably like got in their tents.
Yeah,
Whatever.
that, and you just think about how wide a horse is in comparison to a human.
Oh,
It's going to be easier to hit a horse than a...
that is so sad.
Yeah, or
and,
hit,
is.
and
hit behind a tree or something.
Yeah.
what a way to go! Just get pelted
Yeah,
to death
just
by
As you're
I really
about
don't
to
know
go
what
to war,
happens.
You're already in
and it's
war.
not
Just
even
walking.
war.
Yeah.
It's-
And then you're trying to run for safety and just like that woman just
Yeah.
done.
Can you imagine being there in a field and everyone around you is being pummeled to death by ice, and you're just hoping that that big piece doesn't hit you in the right spot? I mean, I can't even.
When you
probably
first were talking about it, I was thinking it had to have been some sort of gathering. So I'm thinking Coachella.
Yeah.
They're all standing around. and
yeah, Yeezy's coming. Oh god.
taking their Instagram pictures, and all of a sudden, a giant hailstorm comes.
Knocks the phone out
Yeah.
of their hand first, and they're like, "Huh?
Oh no!
What happened?"
Well, hail always starts small, right? It's like tink, 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 tink,
Yep.
tink, and then
Well, I was even thinking about in the story, you're going to have such a variety of size. It's not all going to be huge.
No.
So, I mean, you start off, you're out there thinking, just imagine Florida. If this happens in Florida, you think about some of the most recent hurricanes. You see the videos of people standing out in the storm. They've got an American flag and their hair waving, like rocking out. There's going to be someone out there like, oh, it's just a hailstorm. That's going to be nothing.
That's
They
like
get hurt hit by the first couple little guys, and they're like, oh, this is not big hail. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes, even on the smaller end, a 1 foot piece of hail that comes and breaks their arm. And they're like, oh, this is real. And you're,
Mother Nature means business.
yeah.
well, as it's coming in, right? Like in the story, even though Dylan is ahead of the curtain, his truck still gets hit by that massive piece off the side of his hood. I mean, they're not all going to be falling in that uniform line, but can you imagine hearing that coming? Like,
Yeah, I will say from the story perspective, it really amplified the intensity of the storm when you were kind of experiencing it through Dylan's eyes. Like with Kendra, it was like, oh, okay, this is a tornado. You and I used to live in Oklahoma, Ivan, so we're familiar with tornadoes. Some of them are scary, some of them, they're all right.
right?
Yeah, no big deal. And yeah, the cloud's a little menacing, but the intensity of the storm. I was telling Ivan when I was reading it, I was like, I feel like I'm in the middle of an action movie right now. Like I'm in the middle of Twister trying to escape this giant storm that's basically going to take my life.
Oh, it's so true. And on top of that, I think it starts off so well with Kendra's dad being such a worrywart. So
yeah.
it just automatically puts them both, even though they're not together, it puts them both in it. Oh, this isn't going to be as bad. Because Kendra's like, you always worry, Dad. It's going to be okay. I still have half an hour until it even comes. All I see is a storm in the distance. Like, it's not going to be that bad. And even Dylan, as he drives away, he's like, oh, I bet Kendra's dad called her and he's freaking out.
Yeah.
Because so I think that almost kind of hurts them a little bit because they downplay the storm through their own past experiences of someone trying to worry for them.
Well, I'll admit, growing up outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, every spring when tornado season was back in, there were always times when you had false alarms. The tornado sirens would go off, tornado would occur, and everything would be all right. And I've only seen one tornado in person in my life, and that was a very surreal experience. But most of the time, you get conditioned to think that it's not as bad as it seems. And that works out 99% of the time until the 1% when it is actually as bad as they said. And it's better to err on the side of caution. That's the way her dad always thought. And Kendra was like, whatever, second floor, I'm fine, without realizing that a tornado was about to
hit
come
her
have
too.
her for lunch.
That, and I think it's kind of human nature. Well, people talk about different experiences they've had, where negative or positive, you kind of, it's something that you've heard about, but it doesn't really impact you until you've actually been through it and experienced it yourself. And it's not just it happened to somebody else; it happens to other people.
Right.
Until it happens to you, you don't really realize the impact.
And I think that's just humans in general. Until it really affects you, sometimes it's hard to put things into perspective, and that causes so many problems of, oh, well, it doesn't affect me, so why should I truly care about this?
Yeah.
And for her dad to be worried, even though he's not even there, in her mind it's almost a reverse, like, oh, it's not going to affect him and he's worrying so much, like, I'm not scared, you shouldn't be scared. Oh, Dad, don't worry, I'll go and hide in the bathroom if it comes.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be safe from the hail. I'm on the second floor of a 4-story building. Like, it's not going to hurt me. And then she looks out the window and there's more than one tornado. And all of a sudden this is going to affect me.
Yeah,
And
this
And
is
it's
real.
too late.
yeah,
But-
it's way too late.
Even then, like, her and her family are from Missouri, and Missouri gets tornadoes. So even then, she was probably like, oh, these are just tornadoes. But I'm sure we only got to see the very start of the tornado.
Yeah,
So,
we didn't see
it-
any.
Yeah, so in Kendra's mind, she's probably like, oh, tornadoes, we'll just do the bathroom hiding thing. But they probably amplified, got even bigger with the hail intensifying as well. So, yeah, it wasn't any kind of storm that she had experienced before. And, well, she won't be experiencing anything again. So,
And it wasn't until later that you really learn the effect that tornadoes had too. I mean, Dylan recaps later on a little bit, or the narrator. We kind of already touched on it, but part of the problem was the tornadoes too, because if it was just the hail, you probably could have been safe in a big building like that.
It could have, yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Like,
the
it would've
fourth
been
floor, maybe
damaged,
some hail
yeah.
came through the roof, but
Yeah.
third floor, second floor, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
But not in the case of a tornado.
And so that, I mean, I'm sure there were so many different people who, if you were in a situation like that, can't even imagine how terrifying. But also it goes from, I'm just going to stay here because I'm safe, to this is the end for all of us. And even you think about Dylan's parents, I don't know if it actually is the case, but for me, for whatever reason, I'm thinking a 1-story, like,
I was too.
smaller family house. That's so funny. How safe is a place like that going to be from hail? That's going to come straight through a roof.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, and the windows are going to be nearby too.
yeah.
Like, even if you hide away from the windows with hail that size, it's going to impact you no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what. He'll probably go through the walls.
Yeah.
And you're mistaken if you think that Kendra's dad is going to calm down at all now that he's lost his daughter, when he was right.
Yeah.
He was right to be as concerned as he was.
Absolutely.
And that's the only red herring he needs to amplify that type of behavior in the future. In my mind, she had 2 sibling brothers. I don't know that I ever mentioned that, but he'll be even more protective of his family for future incidents.
And I was going to ask, where did you imagine her dad to be that they were so far apart?
Still in Missouri.
Still Missouri, just in a different portion. Okay.
Right. I imagine like St. Louis-ish area, like maybe just suburb Missouri, and she happened to move down to Houston.
Okay.
Yeah. Big girl job in corporate somewhere in Houston.
Do you all know, are you familiar with how hail forms?
No, but I'm sure it's water and cold air.
You're wrong.
Dang it.
No, I'm just
Wow.
joking.
Wow.
I'm joking. It's funny, right? Because I imagine that we all took earth science at some point in middle school, high school along the way.
Yeah.
And yet the 3 of us, educated folks, sit around this table, and none of us could recount exactly how hail is made. Although we probably learned it and put it on a test, right?
Yeah.
But we forget these things.
In
And
I
elementary
got a B
school
in
of
earth
some sort.
science.
Yeah.
if it weren't for me watching my car get devastated and pulverized by this hail and feeling so helpless, I would have never looked up its origin and how it's actually made. And I think the process is fascinating. What happens is these storm cells that often have a flat bottom that produce tornadoes, they get these huge hammerheads on them, right? They're these really tall, really powerful storm clouds.
Thor style.
Yeah, you imagine what I'm seeing, like really tall clouds.
Yep.
You ever seen them from far away?
Mm-hmm.
Like out on the plains and stuff?
Probably.
It's spooky. So in this, they said that the storm cell was twice as tall as most hailstorms, right? What happens? Water precipitation in the bottom of that cloud starts funneling. It gets turbulent, right, between hot and cold air. And the water particle gets brought all the way to the top of the storm cloud. And what's it like up there? It's very cold. So this one water droplet turns into a piece of ice. And from the very, very, very tippy top of that cloud, it falls all the way through. And what happens? This little ice ball, it collects other water droplets. And it's still cold, so they freeze and they add on to it. So the size of the hail is
It
directly...
has twice the size to fall.
So
it has twice,
that's how they got so big.
theoretically,
Ooh.
twice the amount of
The size.
water it can collect as it goes down.
The size of hail is directly correlated to the height of the storm cell cloud, because it's further that the hail can fall and collect more water moisture before it drops out of the bottom. And how fascinating is it to process? It's still... Like, I sit here in my late 20s and wrap my mind around this, that a droplet of water ascends far enough into the sky that it freezes and falls and collects other pieces and becomes this giant, perfectly circular orb of ice and falls and smashes to the ground. If anyone ever says, I'm bored, they're not thinking enough. This is the world we live in. Are you joking? That is so bananas.
And that's its whole purpose. That's a cycle.
Yeah.
And then
I
boop.
picture a giant pot of boiling water as it cycles through, except for instead of it being heat, increasing temperature of the water, it's the opposite. It creates this freezer type of thing at the top that is so cool.
Any last thoughts here as we wrap up our recap for the largest hailstorm in history?
By a lot. By a lot.
I thought you were going to say buy a lot of headgear.
Oh, yeah.
Protection.
Absolutely buy a lot of
Buy
healthcare
good health
protection.
insurance.
One
everyone.
thing
Yes.
I do have to
Full
say,
bodysuit.
some of my favorite videos of hailstorms are when people are worried about their car, and so they go out and they do sideways laying down jumping jacks on their cars to try and prevent hail.
Is this real?
Oh yeah.
Are you being serious?
No, yeah. And obviously it's not big hail, but like there's plenty of videos of people laying on top of their cars doing snow angels.
They're literally
trying
starfishing.
trying to prevent. I can only imagine
I
the
should've
Trying to
poor
block a field goal.
the poor fool who decides to
should've done
starfish protect his car during this storm. And rest in peace. Man,
Yes.
that's all I have to say. for him.
Definitely RIP.
Well, I hope that everyone out there has a chance. Hopefully your car doesn't get obliterated like mine did in front of your very own eyes as you wear your bicycle helmet and feel very helpless and stupid. But I hope that everyone is afforded the opportunity to feel... I hope that everyone is afforded the opportunity to feel small and helpless, because there's a certain branch of humility that I got seeing that storm. And with that...
Death comes for us all.
Thank you all for listening. Next episode, we return with a brand new audiobook story. Talk to you soon. Assuming the world is still standing by then.
We would like to thank Kevin MacLeod for his music found on Incompetech.com.